The Shade number 12, the final issue, written by James Robinson, art by Gene Ha. This is essentially the ending to the story, but also it is the origin. It is telling us how Shade came to get his shadow powers. So we open up with Shade, or rather Richard Swift, as he was before that, being tied up to this cross-looking object. And basically saying, like, just do it. Just kill me now. If you're not going to let me see my family again, just end it already. And it was 1838, and we see a few weeks earlier, he was in London, and he enjoyed London. He had a successful business. He was an importer. He found things for people and brought them into London. He had a family, a wife, and 2 sons that he loved. He was a bit partial to his older son rather than his youngest, but his youngest was still a newborn, so wasn't really much to talk to the son about at that point. But he just goes over how much he absolutely loves spending time with his family, and how much time he wished he could have spent afterwards. But then he gets into talking about how the events actually played out. And the first person he talks about is his good friend Charles Dickens. Yes, that Charles Dickens. And he would have plenty of conversations with Charles about the stories and things like that, until one day during one of their conversations at his business, a man walks in named Culp, he's a dwarf. He comes in, he has a beautiful wife who is a mute, and Charles is immediately taken by the wife, but of course that's not going to end in anything well. But Culp comes up and basically says, like, now here's the deal. You are an importer, Mr. Swift. I will give you an exorbitant sum of money if you can bring me a real live lion. It needs to be alive, and it needs to be a lion. And he's like, oh, I mean, sure, why not? And he said it would take some time, but he agreed to the deal. And during that time, he got to talking to Mr. Culp, and Culp shared these stories of adventure all over the different continents. And he admits he's never been to Africa, but he had stories from the Mediterranean Sea, all the way up to, like, the far north. Like, he had all these stories, and Richard was completely enraptured by it. But Charles Dickens knew there was something wrong with Culp, and he was like, no, his wife, I feel like his wife is unable to cry out for help. He's just not a good man. Richard, why can't you see that? And turns out that there's a character in the old curiosity shop named Dick Swiveller, who is an easily misled man, because it was written at this same period that Richard was being misled by Culp. But regardless, he continued his job of trying to get the lion. In July, he managed to get one to London, but unfortunately it died during the journey. So during September, they tried again, and they did get another one. So at the end of September, he got the lion in, and Culp was just absolutely delighted by it, and he insisted that Richard attend a gala that this lion was going to be featured at. And it's like, oh, yes, of course. So him and Charles both went, because Charles was saying that he was going to keep an eye out because he didn't trust this event. But when they get there, Charles, 2 other unknown people, and Richard were all tied up. And essentially this whole thing was a sacrifice. And Culp explained, like, Richard, I hate you. I hated every moment of you. Like, I'm stuck out here walking the earth, like, down in the dirt. I have to work. I listen to these sailors talk about their adventures at the bars. And then there you are with your happy family, and you're so successful and all that. I literally hate you. And that's why I've tricked you into becoming a sacrifice here. Because here's the deal. I believe in the dark arts. I believe in magic. And I am going to sacrifice you to a god, a goddess of witchcraft, whatever it is. Her name is, Scathach, hard to say. But I'm going to sacrifice you so that I can have power. I can finally be one of the upper people. And this Scathach specifically requested you. Once I started talking to you, I had a dream. It came to me in a dream that you were to be the one sacrificed. So Charles at this point is like, I told you, Richard. And Richard's like, yeah, sorry. Oh, well. And he cast the spell, and immediately... Oh, and the whole reason for the lion was that the lion, it has to be a primal kill, and this lion is going to be released and feed on Richard and the other captives. So he sends out some bones from a bag, immediately some shadows start spreading and something goes wrong, at least in the way that Culp did not mean it to. And at that point, the shadows engulf Richard, and we see him immediately become the Shade. But what felt like a moment to us was apparently years for him. And he thought about his family, he thought about his wife and his children, and instantly the memories just started ebbing away. Like it was memories of a different person. And he doesn't remember immediately what happened next, but he does get recounted it later on that he took Charles and he just threw him out of the fight. He managed to put him up on the rafters, and Culp managed to escape, somehow getting his own shadow powers. But everyone else in that room, from Culp's wife to all the people who were watching on, who were part of his weird little magic cult, all of them were immediately killed by Shade's shadow magic, including the lion. They specifically make mention. So at that point, Shade basically, he just removes himself from the world. He just walks out. He has no memory of who he was, where he came from, anything like that. When he did finally get to be some of his memories back, he made it clear, like, I should leave my family alone, not show them this monster I've become. And he just started a life elsewhere as the Shade instead of Richard Swift. And we cut back to modern day where he's recounting this, and he says, yeah, I made mistakes. I probably should have been there for my family, because maybe they wouldn't have gone down this darker path if I had been there for them. But I still view that Richard Swift as a different person. It's not who I am, it's who I was. I'm now the Shade, but the Shade can be better as well. The Shade can be something more than he was before, now that I have a greater understanding as to my own weaknesses and my own faults. So that's where it leaves off. That's the Shade. I gotta say, I like it. I definitely do enjoy it as a whole series. I do think it would probably play better if I had read Starman prior, or at least were familiar with the character from Starman. As it stands on its own, this did just feel like a sort of globe-trotting action-adventure sort of story. And then this last issue only really plays if you were really wondering about the Shade's origin. Like, it didn't do anything in terms of development, really. It just said, like, no, here's how he came to be. And it strikes me more as that would have worked more if I was into Starman, where I had been exposed to this character but never found out, like, where the hell did he come from. But I can recognize that it is a good story. I can recognize that it is well written. The art is fantastic. It does a great job characterizing and, like, really playing with a balance of action and philosophy, and just, here's a person who is essentially a god and cannot be defeated. So how do they play things out? So I like it. I do definitely enjoy it. I'll give this particular issue, I'll give a 7.5. I don't know where that really stands in terms of previous ratings, but it was a good series. And I think for fans of Starman, it's definitely going to be a lot better than it is for someone going in blind, but it was still definitely good on its own without that knowledge from Starman.